Good afternoon. Good afternoon to you. I'd like to welcome you very much to our forum, Goi Peace Foundation Forum 2012. We'll be starting shortly. I have the pleasure of serving as a moderator. My name is Naoko Nitta. The theme of the forum is, as you see up here, values of happiness. What is true happiness? What is real richness? We would like to spend the afternoon thinking about these things with all of you. It is a program of 3.5 hours. Hope you enjoy it till the very end. I would like here to invite Mr. Hiro Sayonji, President of Goi Peace Foundation, who will say a few words on behalf of the foundation. Good afternoon, everybody. This is the last day of the 3-long weekend. It's also a Sunday. Thank you very much for joining. You must have had many plans, but we have from about 20 ambassadors, and the staff of embassies of 20 countries. We thank you very much for joining us. It was March 11th last year, after the triple accident took place. It is now 1.5 years plus since the triple accident. We have had in the past the Kanto earthquake of 1923, the defeat in the World War II, and the Hanshin Awaji earthquake of 1995. So we've overcome those. Compared, however, to the past major disasters, the biggest challenge this time is posed by the nuclear power plant accident in Fukushima. To solve or put to rest the nuclear power plant accident is much more complex. You have to decommission nuclear reactors, disassemble or disposal, clean up contaminated water, and decontaminate the affected regions. Above all, the disposal of spent fuel and the highly radioactive debris are the most challenging. With regard to spent fuel, in the site of number 4 nuclear power plant, there are thousands of spent fuel rods placed in the pool. If there were to be another major earthquake with the water temperature rising, exposing the spent fuel rods, there will be a large amount of radiation emitted to the concern of the international community and the scientists and experts in this country as well. While not limited to Fukushima, disposal of highly radioactive waste, euphemistically described as mansions built without floors, the toilets. We have no solutions either here in Japan nor around the world. With that as a background, we will need much more energy and time in order to reconstruct after the disaster. I have felt ever since the disaster that we should accept the disaster as a signal of warning from great nature, to rethink how we should live and how we should build our communities. I feel it is an opportunity that is given to us, and I've had that feeling, a strong feeling, since the disaster. From that perspective, The afternoon we'll spend together. The theme we see, values of happiness. I think it is important we give it a real thought. What is happiness? And in fact, the Goi Peace Foundation organized in 2005 a forum entitled Building New Civilization, co-organized by 14 international organizations, including the Club of Rome. Humankind must graduate from the materialistic civilization of the 20th century. And I think we have realized that we should start anew. President Gorbachev, economists, philosophers, bioscientists, professionals of different backgrounds have put their thoughts together and discussed this issue. And at that time, as we think of the new civilization we will build together, I have suggested 4 S's. The first is sustainability, including humankind. Earth must be sustainable with all the life contained. The second S is system, economic system, social system, the many systems, cultural, of course, and security system that we have created. They are becoming fatigued. Perhaps we should revisit systems so that they are harmonized between them. The third S stands for spirituality, human evolution and human growth symbolized in spirituality. The last S is science. Science, not a materialistic science, hopefully a new science, to search the truth in new areas that we have not visited in the past. And I believe that is going to be a new challenge for us humankind. So these 4 S's are keywords to create a new civilization, each interacting with another. And that was the discussion that took place in 2005. But the most important is that the direction of the new civilization will be determined by individual value systems and collective value systems. For example, civilization based in the 20th century, human mind, human demand, and they were based on materialism. Therefore, the civilization became materialistic civilization. I'm not saying that it's wrong. I think materialistic civilization in the long history of humankind has served humanity, given us a great deal of conveniences. But there are negative sides, dark sides of that convenience. If we continue to push forward on this materialistic civilization, we will see the destruction or disintegration of humankind. And I think what is happening to Japan will make that clear. The report that Club of Rome published 40 years ago, and what is stated in that report is exactly what we see. That as a background, we had that triple accident, March 11th, earthquake, tsunami, and the nuclear power plant accident. Can we use that as a time for us to change? Can the civilization change? Can we as individuals change? And I think that is what the question, serious question that we must ask each one of us. I feel that there are 3 values involved. To set the new direction of the civilization, That has much to do with our values, humankind's values. What do we see? In what do we see real happiness and true richness? And that will determine which civilization we want to build, which direction we will be going. So I think this theme is very important in thinking about the new civilization that we'll be building. The second is important theme as we consider reconstruction in the wake of the disaster. It shouldn't mean just reconstructing what was before the accident, disaster. We ought to make the disaster an opportunity for us to build a new model of living, new model of community. When we were able to do that, we will be really reconstructing communities and lives after the disaster. And the third is that it has to do with the value that we, each one of us, must be thinking for ourselves. We will be a Swedish lady will be receiving the Goi Peace Foundation Award. And she is going to be the first. Helena Norberg-Hodge is the first lady who will be receiving the award. She has been accompanied by her husband here. She has lived in Ladakh, India, for a long time, and she has found the true happiness and the true richness, and she has been acting on those answers. And she has also directed a film called Economics of Happiness. And after she received the Peace Award, we look forward very much to listening to her lecture and also to the talk discussion that will follow that in our second part of the forum. This year too, collaborating with UNESCO, we had the International Youth Essay Contest. This year, do you know what? We had from 151 countries, 12,000 entries. Compared to the previous year, it was an increase of 70%. It was a dramatic record. And 5 languages used and 12,000 entries. So the judges had no summer holidays. They had to have the first and second judges, and the special judges for this effort has come up with the last winners. There was a great surprise, and the best essay in the young people's group happened to be last year's best essay, essayist sister. Out of 12,000 entries, 2 sisters have won the best entry 2 years running. It's like winning a lottery. It is a challenge. And you can imagine how very wonderful the essays were. And today's essayist will be announced before you. In the finale, my wife and I are very close to a soprano singer, Colon Erika, and she has agreed to come and share her voice with us. It is lots of programs packed into one afternoon. Hopefully you will spend this time enjoy it and take back something for thought. So thank you again for coming.
Thank you so much. Now then, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce the excellencies, ambassadors and representatives of the various embassies who are in Tokyo by the name of the country. Embassy of Afghanistan. Would you please stand up? Embassy of Bahrain. Embassy of Belarus. Embassy of Cuba. Embassy of Morocco. Embassy of Palau. Embassy of Panama. Embassy of Philippines. Embassy of Tajikistan. Embassy of Tanzania. Embassy of the United States of America. Embassy of Venezuela. We have representatives from 13 countries. Thank you so much for your attendance despite your extremely busy schedule. Next, we would like to move on to introduce the awardee of the 2012 Goi Peace Award. It will be presented by Dr. Kazuo Murakami, the Emeritus Professor of the University of Tsukuba and member of the Goi Peace Award Selection Committee. Dr. Murakami is the director of the Foundation for Advancement of International Science and its Bio Laboratory, who is the world-renowned researcher in the genetics research. Dr. Professor Murakami, please. Goi Peace Award, as you know, is to award individuals and groups who have lauding activities in research in the direction of the principle and the philosophy in line with the Declaration for All Life on Earth, which is advocated by the Goi Peace Foundation for those who have conspicuous achievements in striving for the peace and harmony for mankind in the field of education, science, culture, and arts. Through the very fair and impartial selection, we have decided to give the award to Ms. Helena Norberg-Hodge, who is the pioneer of the localization activity. She was born in Sweden, and she has studied in a number of European and American universities. She has studied linguistics. It was in 1975 that she went to Ladakh, which was opened for the very first time to the outside world, which is located in India. And there she created the dictionary between the language of Ladakh and English. Since then, she has lived together with the people in Ladakh, and she has pursued the project of preserving the traditional culture and environment, which are beginning to be lost in the waves of modernization. In 1986, she was awarded the another so-called Nobel Prize, the Right Livelihood Award. Since then, she has studied and researched into the globalization and how it has impacted the regional culture and ecology, as well as to the identity. She has tried to find solutions to the various problems in the world, be it poverty and or the environment. As a result, she said that localization and diversification are the solution as an alternative economic model. She has been busy in writing books and creating movies and speaking, and her wide-ranging education and enlightening activities have spread to various countries in the regions in the name of localization activity, so that the strengthening of the local economy with the basis of growing locally and consuming locally, so as to have strong ties with the community. On the 6th and 7th of November, Dalai Lama has visited Japan and had the opportunity to have the dialogue with 11 scientists from Japan here in Tokyo. And as one of the organizers, I had the honor of spending the time with him over the course of 2 days. He was highly appreciative of the activities of Helena, and he was happy that she was to be awarded this award. Ancient Future is a book she has published. And he has written a long introduction of the book for her. Helena has been very active over the course of 30 years in a steadfast manner, and we are most honored to be able to present the Goi Peace Award to her. Though it's a short introduction, and this is the comment from the selection committee in deciding the award to be given to Ms. Helena Norberg-Hodge. Thank you very much.
では続いて授賞式に移りたいと思います。2012
presentation of the award, 2012 Goi Peace Award,
ヘレナ・ノーバーグ・ホッジさんです。どうぞステージまでお越しください。
Miss Helena
ゴイ平和賞の贈呈はゴイ平和財団会長西園寺正美より行います。
Madame Masami Sayonji, the chair of the Goi Peace Foundation, will be presenting the award. Diploma of Merit, the Goi Peace Foundation is privileged to confer the Goi Peace Award upon Ms. Helena Norberg-Hodge in recognition of her pioneering work in the localization movement, which has contributed to the revitalization of cultural and biological diversity and the strengthening of local communities and economies, thereby helping to create a more sustainable and equitable world for the well-being of all life on Earth. November 25th, 2012. Masami Sayonji, Chairperson. Hiro Sayonji, President, the Goi Peace Foundation. Congratulations.
Congratulations. 受賞者のヘレナさん、誠におめでとうございました。プレゼンターの皆様、どうもありがとうございました。それではヘレナ・ノーバーグ・ホッジさんに記念講演をお願いいたします。
So please start your commemorative lecture, The Economics of Happiness.
Thank you. Sayonji-san, the whole remarkable Sayonji family the members of the selection committee, and all of you have come here today. I'm extremely honored to receive this award, especially to follow as the first woman in the footsteps of world-renowned thinkers and activists, and many of whom, incidentally, I can count as my friends and colleagues. I'm very honored, and I also take this as a great source of strength and hope that an organization as prestigious as the Goi Foundation should value economic localization, should value it as a way of improving the way of life for mankind and healing the planet. I myself believe that economic localization can heal the planet, can heal our society, and even ourselves. So I accept this award and say thank you from the bottom of my heart. I accept it on behalf of the emerging worldwide localization movement. I founded my organization, the International Society for Ecology and Culture, in order to promote economic localization as an alternative to the dominant economy. We see it as an alternative to socialism, communism, and corporate capitalism, all of which have been systems that have been highly centralized, top-down systems that have not respected a basic, fundamental principle of life, which is diversity. It is diversity that is stifled and destroyed by these top-down heavy systems. These systems are also so rigid that they cannot respect another fact of life, which is process and change. These systems, all three of them, have also broken up the fabric of interdependence, the interconnectedness between human beings and the natural world. So from our perspective, these systems are anti-life. And that means not only anti-nature, but anti the needs of humans. So we obviously need fundamental change. And having studied the situation, it became very clear to me that localization, which fundamentally is about the shortening of distances between production and consumption. So as an economic trajectory, it is about this reconnecting and rebuilding of relationships between human beings and between them and the natural world. That this is a systemic and vitally important alternative to these dominant systems. Localizing doesn't mean eliminating trade, not even international trade. It doesn't mean that every village, every individual should become totally self-reliant. We're talking about a shift in direction to rebuild the health of those interdependent systems. And it also means, from a political level, that we need to work to ensure that government set the rules for business, rather than business setting the rules for government and therefore for society. So this is very different from a communist model where government runs business. This is a question of society setting the rules. And what we have had for a long, long time now is a deregulation of global trade and finance. In the name of free trade, what's been happening is that we have been giving global private entities, banks and multinational corporations, the freedom to move around, searching for cheap labor, cheap resources, the biggest, fastest infrastructures, And they've been able to blackmail governments because they say, if you don't give us what we want, we will go elsewhere. This structurally, from our point of view, is the main reason why we find ourselves in crisis, surrounded by crises today. Tremendous financial instability, whole nations going bankrupt, and of course, because of massive energy use, not only global warming and the frightening vagaries of weather, but an extinction of species, the clear cutting of forests, the Amazon threatened. We know the stories. So the benefits of reversing that, the benefits of, first of all, politically ensuring that governments as a group collaborate to take control of corporations, to regulate the mobile corporations rather than continuing to deregulate. That means moving business to what I call being localized, meaning belonging to a place, localized or place-based. Either you have to be Japanese or Brazilian or American. You cannot float about blackmailing governments and therefore making them scared of regulation. This is what we hear all the time. If we do this, they'll go elsewhere. And this fear of being left behind, from our point of view, is the main reason why we have these serious crises. On the other hand, as you start shortening the distances and moving towards more place-based business, you get enormous benefits. And we already have demonstrations of this around the world. You can literally increase productivity, particularly from the land, but even in terms of human labor. You can increase productivity while you reduce the environmental impact. On a crowded planet, this is a necessity. We can also see that by localizing, you start a process where you start reducing the gap between rich and poor. Something that is not about creating a level where everyone earns exactly the same thing. No, this is not about monoculture, but it is about reducing a gap which in every country, I know of no single exception. Maybe there are some out there, but I know of no single exception. Today, including in my native country of Sweden, the gap between rich and poor is escalating dramatically, day by day. And the majority of people are recognizing that it's going too far. Localizing as a systemic strategy starts to reduce that gap. It reduces it also to a level where things become visible and accountable. You see the factory owner and how labor is treated. You see the pollution that is flowing into the streams, because the pollution is not on the other side of the world, and the use of labor is not on the other side of the world. Perhaps most importantly, by shortening distances, we structurally start to rebuild that sense of interdependence with one another and with nature, which is the foundation of every spiritual tradition and religion. At the very heart is the reminder of the oneness of life, of the interconnectedness and interdependence. Economic localization is a structural path to start creating a world where people experience that interdependence. And this brings with it enormous benefits as people feel a sense of community, feel that interdependence, and that is why it becomes the economics of happiness. I'm looking at this from a very big picture point of view, and bear with me because I may be a bit chaotic in my outline. I'm looking at the very, very big picture, and I also want to apologize if in doing so it can sound a bit general, maybe superficial, but I want to assure you that it's coming from experience in many different cultures around the world and over the last nearly 40 years. So I first had my eyes open to these connections. I was forced basically to see them as I ended up in Ladakh, or Little Tibet, as was mentioned earlier. This was an area that had been sealed off from the outside world. It had not been colonized. And during the modern era, during the development era, it had been sealed off for political reasons. I was invited out as part of a film team. I was a linguist. And I come to a part of the world that was completely different from anything I had experienced before. Here were people who were living in a very simple way, because they were living as they had done for thousands of years, constantly changing, trading with the outside world, connecting with the outside world, but on their own terms. And of course, compared to our consumer culture, with our central heating and with a multitude of comfortable products and so on, that wasn't there. But I was amazed to find no sign of poverty as you see it in the so-called third world, or even as you see it in America. No poverty of that kind. No one went hungry. Unemployment had never existed. And they lived in large, spacious houses, had delicious food, limited but delicious food. And I learned to speak the language fluently and came to know the culture almost from the inside, almost in the first few months. And perhaps more than anything, what made me decide to stay on after the film was finished was that I was fascinated by the seeming joy of the Ladakhis. I couldn't quite believe that people could be as happy as they seemed. There was a sort of radiance and a sense of humor in almost every sphere of life. Those of you who have been around the Dalai Lama get a sense of what I'm talking about. And this is what I found in the villages, among old and young. A lightness, a sense of humor, and a wisdom and compassion that drew me to these people. And I over the years, I became aware that this happiness was for real, as it were. And I became aware that perhaps the most important reason for it was that every mother had roughly 10 live-in caretakers for every child, so that every baby that was born was surrounded by arms, siblings, aunts, uncles, great-grandmothers, great-uncles, neighbors, friends, constantly carried. And if the child was ill, no one got tired or impatient. So this sense of being connected and loved and nurtured. And I also want to say, maybe in Japan you're familiar with this, but in the West, we don't quite know how to do this, because there can be a focus on a child, like, a 3-year-old child is asked, well, what do you want? And the love is actually too much focus. In Ladakh, in the traditional culture, everyone was there to care for the child, but the child was clearly adapting to the needs and values of the adults, adapting to the life that the adults determined. In any case, as I started witnessing changes in Ladakh, the difference between this traditional way and the modern way became very, very clear. But first of all, I just want to reiterate that being surrounded closely by so many people who cared for you, who saw you, who loved you, was clearly one of the most important cornerstones of happiness as an adult. That sense of being loved and nurtured internalized into human beings who were caring and loving themselves. And that, of course, meant also that there was a self-love and a self-respect that I later on saw threatened by the changes that came with the outside economy. But first, I just want to also reiterate that in the traditional way of life, of course, the traditional economy reinforced that sense of caring for each other, for being interdependent. all around people, building houses, harvesting. There were forms of exchange and support, traditions where people would stagger the harvest so that they could help each other, groups of people working together. Because the scale of the activities, the actual farm, the building of the house, was relatively small and the work was quite diversified, every day different, it was clear that this work was also meaningful and enjoyable, and that these structural relationships of give and take in this local economy were a great gift in terms of human well-being, human health. But as the change came, I saw how suddenly people were bombarded with images, basically ideas of what modern Western life is about. Television, advertising, even school books, as Western-style schooling was brought in. All of them reinforced the idea that living in villages, working on the land, was backward, primitive, and essentially of the past. The school books literally said, and still say today in India, we have to get away from farming into the city. This is progress. The people on the land are backward, stupid, and poor. The images from the West, through films and so on, gave the impression that in the West, we also have all the community, we also have the leisure time that the Ladakhis had, something that was quite remarkable, where people produced most of their food, clothing, and shelter, that they had so much leisure time, but they did. There was never a hurry, even during the harvest time. Celebration and song in the middle of the peak working season. So the Ladakhis, when they saw images of Western life, all the cars and the fabulous technologies, the incredible amounts of money, which was also reinforced by tourism when people came in and one day would spend $100. It was like Martians coming to Tokyo and in one day spending roughly $100,000. Because the Ladakhis in the traditional self-reliant economy had had their clothing, their food, their water, their medicine. Virtually all their needs were met without money. Money was used for small and relatively trivial needs from far away. So it was a very small part of their economy. Anyway, with these images, with these impressions, young people got the sense that their parents who wanted them to work and farm were stupid, and that they should obviously, as quickly as possible, become educated, modern educated, go into the city and do that work that modern people do, which means sitting at a desk in front of a computer and ideally being a doctor or an engineer. But what I saw was, in a very, very short period, was that this new system, which promised so much, and which was an illusion, because the Ladakhis didn't know that even in the West we have unemployment, that in the West we don't have so much time, in the West there's a lot of unhappiness. So this illusion, in a very short time, was shattered, because as people got educated for these modern jobs, they found that there were far too few jobs and far too many people wanted them, and within about a decade, this led to such intense competition between people that it led to bloodshed. I had arrived in Ladakh and experienced Buddhists and Muslims who had lived side by side for 500 years. There had never been group conflict. Within a decade, the creation of artificial scarcity of jobs meant that they were fighting each other. And I and my husband one night wake up in the middle of the night with shouting and screaming as Buddhists had thrown a bomb at the Muslim neighboring house. They'd been neighbors for generations. And this was a shock and something that has catapulted me into spending very, very hard, long years trying to get this message out, that economically when we create unemployment, we are depriving every human being of a basic human right. We are also prescribing conflict, racism, fundamentalism, and war. So the roots of conflict, to a very great extent, lie in an economic system that unnecessarily creates unemployment. I just want to stop here to stress this by pointing out that on this very crowded planet of ours now, unemployment has nothing to do with overpopulation. Many people somehow have the idea that there's some limited natural pool of jobs, so they accept this terrible pressure that our young people are under now, where in almost every country the younger generation faces a workplace that is vastly more competitive and that offers jobs that are also less meaningful, more time pressured. They're expected to work longer hours if they're lucky enough to get a job, but for the vast majority, the threat of getting nothing is part of the reason why we have an epidemic of depression, an epidemic of suicide. As you know, hikikomori is one of the responses to this. But I hope that in Japan you're also aware that this epidemic of depression is worldwide. In Ladakh, it's translated into a suicide a month, mostly by young people. And suicide was something that happened maybe once in a generation in the past. So this is extremely serious, and it's also why it is so wonderful to know that there is a different systemic path that really can work. So from my point of view, we are talking about essentially destroying ourselves and the planet out of blindness, out of old, outdated ideas about what we have to do, when in fact, if we would stop for a minute, look more holistically, and I believe also more globally, it would be so clear that there is this alternative. And the beauty of this alternative is that it is not one system imposed on a world of diversity. It's a model which adapts economic activity to culture, to spiritual, ecological, and cultural values. Economics gets shaped by those values rather than a global consumer culture which is shaping culture. So I ended up, of course, from these experiences in Ladakh, as I said, forced to try to get these ideas out. And I wrote a book, as was mentioned, Ancient Futures, and we made a film based on that as well. And both of them have been translated into almost 50 languages. And from all those language groups, we have had again and again the message, what you tell about Ladakh, the story of Ladakh, is our story too. It's just that it happened earlier. But we too went from a culture of greater community, greater ecological sustainability and connection, into a consumer culture that is making us less happy. We too have similar problems now of unemployment and scarcity. So when we look at this economic system that is responsible for so many problems, there are key areas that we need to look at. One of them, of course, is how we measure success. This is something that has been discussed fairly widely, that this concept of GDP is not only inadequate, but it's actually destructive, because GDP increases with breakdown. War is a wonderful way of ensuring, you bomb a city to smithereens, you have to rebuild it, lots of economic activity, so it increases GDP. And this is not an exception. If we wanted to be really nationalistic and do well by the economy, not only would we go out and just buy, as governments are now encouraging us to do, a lot of consumer wasteful products that we throw away, this is how we're meant to improve our way of life, but we would actually make sure that we were ill, so that we would need to have chemotherapy regularly, we would need to have expensive pills on a regular basis, radiation. If we stayed healthy, it would be rather unpatriotic, because we wouldn't be contributing to GDP. If we pollute our water so people feel compelled to buy their water in plastic bottles, that's good for GDP. We must question, deeply question, this economic system. It is an insanity to allow our political leaders to measure success and progress by this indicator, which I was going to say outdated, but I really doubt whether it was ever a useful indicator, because it simply measures monetary transactions, completely oblivious to whether those are beneficial or destructive. But more than that, and I think where we in ISEC, in my organization, have been ahead, is that we have been looking at how our policies, our economic policies, shape the direction of the economy. And so for a very long time, this has been going on without being discussed, because it's been happening from left to right, as we were saying before. And so there are three major mechanisms that we need to look at. One of them is regulations. And regulations, here we're talking about, most importantly, that governments have been wedded to the notion that ever more global trade is always an improvement, and therefore the deregulation of global trade has been part of the agenda for a very long time. It's one that has escalated since the Second World War with the Bretton Woods institutions, when the IMF and the World Bank were set up, and at that time the very important GATT, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, was set up at the same time. The idea was that all economic activity around the world should be more controlled and pulled into one single global market, dominated by a few global players. Many of the people who promoted that, some of them in my family, fervently believed that this was a way to integrate the human family into a collaborative framework to avoid war. So I have no doubt that there was a lot of good intention behind it. But structurally, what it did was to fuel the growth and wealth of giant global multinational corporations and banks. And as they gained more power, they were able to, as I said earlier, blackmail governments into this agenda of give us more cheap labor, cheap resources, and a very expensive infrastructure, bigger airports, bigger ship ports, much more cheap energy, oil, nuclear power, every kind, because we need lots of energy. And this has been an extremely destructive part, and the key, the strategic sort of acupressure point in this system is this global deregulation. I helped to set up various groups, and we've studied internationally, we've studied this process of globalization for the past 25 years or so, and we've seen that on every continent it is leading to more unemployment, wider gap between rich and poor, less democracy. And I think it's absolutely vital that we look at this in an honest way without blame. There's been a lot of ignorance around this from the top to the bottom. We have not looked at this in a holistic enough way, from a global enough point of view for it to be clear. And I have found that as people go into power, politically and economically, they're often operating under conditions where everything is faster and faster. I know whenever I've had a chance to talk to them, I have to come with sound bites, in just a few seconds. And that is not enough to really see the profound damage on people and nature. So I'm convinced that the major problem is ignorance. And our big problem now is that since big business has so much control in the media, so much influence in science, even in our school books, it becomes very difficult to question the size of big business and the deregulation of both finance and trade. This is where we need your help to, in a compassionate, kindly way, without anger, without pretending that people in power are more greedy or more selfish, which I personally know that many of them are not, that we can get this analysis out. Because in the end, it's a win-win situation for everyone to start the opposite direction of re-regulating global trade and starting to deregulate local and national trade. Because in the process of global deregulation, what has happened is that at the local level, businesses are absolutely stifled by too much bureaucracy and red tape. And this, in turn, has led them to become more and more in favor of further free trade, laissez-faire economics, and at an extreme end, the Tea Party, for instance, in the US, is angry at government, want government out of the way. We don't want to pay taxes. We don't want government getting in the way with their bureaucracy and over-regulation. And there's an anger at the environmental and left side of the political spectrum. Even in Sweden, this type of sentiment is emerging from smaller businesses, farmers, and even in the middle classes. At the same time, the anger towards the left is about immigration, as people feel poorer people coming in from the outside threatening their jobs. There's an increase in xenophobia, prejudice, and fear of the outsider. Recently, even in Sweden, this means a rise in a sort of neo-Nazi party. So again, I think as a Peace Foundation, I am so grateful to the Goi Foundation to be looking at the economy and in a systemic way, because that is what we need to do to bring about more peaceful coexistence on Earth. So what we then have with regulations is that governments, as they've been deregulating the global, they've been over-regulating the local. And that over-regulation has led to the most incredible, wasteful, stupid things, like even inside people's homes, we're spending our tax money making sure that when they build steps, they can't be 2 centimeters further apart. This is supposed to be in the name of public safety. In farming, a farmer who has 10 chickens running around in 1 acre, free and happy and healthy, has to comply with the same health standards as a factory farm that has 10,000, maybe 50,000 chickens in a factory, polluted, overcrowded, and huge health risks. That factory pays the same amount for the health inspector as the farmer with 10 chickens. These complete inversions and injustices are happening in the name of regulations. Big hotels in the US have lobbied the government to make sure that if someone wants to rent out their home as a bed and breakfast, they've got to have the same fire doors and fire mattresses and handicapped ramps and incredibly expensive things, because they know that those small chaps will go out of business. This I could go on about for a long time. We wrote a report some years ago called Small is Beautiful, Big is Subsidized. And these subsidies are also in the form of how our taxes are used to police businesses that are actually more healthy and sustainable, that are more local, and that are more accountable and visible in any case. So I won't go on any more about that, but also to say that with taxes, another aspect of how the economy, how the government steers the economy, the most ridiculous thing that's happening, going way back, is the assumption that ever more technology is a good thing. to replace migrant laborers who are standing in a field all day picking cotton, or slaves, with big machines using lots of petroleum, can look like progress. And we have built into our educational system, starting in school and at university, heavy subsidies, training our minds and the engineering and at every level to... How many? None. Training our people to work in a workforce where they will be supporting unemployment and pollution. So shifting those taxes so that we support instead fuller employment and less use of energy and technology would immediately transform the whole global economy. Well, now, without any of these supports, without either changes in regulations or taxes and subsidies, we now have, from the bottom up, a localization movement that is demonstrating that you can simultaneously increase productivity and reduce pollution while increasing employment and real economic prosperity at the local level. The most important area to look at is food. In food, we have a myth that tells us that ever larger farms and ever bigger supermarkets are necessary to feed the world. This may be the single most important myth that we need to explode. The fact is that in this research, a diversified farm, one where you might have some grain and vegetables and forests and animals, as most traditional farms did, that diversified smaller farm can produce vastly more food per unit of land and water, vastly more, than the giant monoculture linked to the long transport, linked to the supermarket, linked to machinery that picks everything before it's ripe. The fruit has to fit the washing technologies, the supermarket shelves, and we have not only lower productivity from the land, but we have enormous amount of waste where things get thrown away and burned because they don't suit the machinery. This fact that more diversified production on the land, in farming, but also in fishing, forestry, all our use of the natural world, we should be encouraging more diversification, and the best way is to have smaller units with more people working on the land. We now have a local food movement that is growing rapidly around the world. It's taking the form of new farmers markets, edible schoolyards, community-supported agriculture, and we are seeing literally again and again that the farmer can increase the total output, increase profits, while reducing the ecological damage and actually needing to use less land to produce more, earning more, while the local consumers can, not always, but can pay less for fresh organic produce. One of the main reasons why it can still be too expensive is because in the meanwhile those subsidies for trade and transport mean that food from the other side of the world comes into the supermarket costing less than local food. This is a fact from around the world. In Mongolia, where they have 25 million milk-producing animals, you can't even find dairy from Mongolia in Ulaanbaatar. It's from Germany. In Ladakh, I first saw butter from 3 days away over the Himalayas costing half as much in the local market. And that's when I started studying it. I found butter from New Zealand in the UK costing a third of the price of local butter. When you see this globally, you realize this is a completely distorted economy, distorted by the subsidies, taxes, and regulations that make something from 20,000 miles away cost less than something from 1 mile away. When we localize, there will still be international trade, but a banana from 10,000 miles away will cost more than an apple from 10 miles away in an honest economy. And it will mean that we have literally millions of smaller businesses and farmers benefiting from those food economies rather than just a handful of multinationals. So finally, I want to say that with the localization movement, which now has grown so strong that we have changes in banking, there are new banks being set up and credit unions, and we even had an article in Time magazine, in August Time magazine, on loconomics, where they pointed out that with the local banks, the bankers can be more responsible. They know the people they lend to. They know about their lives. And they actually recommended loconomics as a way forward. And a little later in New York Times, they quoted a Microsoft manager, a former Microsoft manager, who said, "The future is local." We are seeing a very rapid increase. We're seeing business alliances, small local businesses linking together. In America, one of the better known ones is called BALLE, the Business Alliance for Local Living Economies. And once you start studying this, you see that many movements like permaculture, the eco-village movement, the slow food movement, and a very powerful organization called Via Campesina, actually the biggest social movement in the world, with about 200 million small farmers, are all pressing in the direction of localization. They are asking for the right to food sovereignty, which means the right to feed themselves and their own people first, not being forced to trade through these heavy subsidies that destroy the local market. So we can not only feel hopeful about a theoretical idea of localization. Once we start looking at what's happening on the ground, we can see evidence for what we're talking about. And I was talking about the interdependence between people and between them and the land. Perhaps one of the most beautiful and important examples of that combines the structural, economic with the personal and the social, is just looking at the difference between people who shop in the supermarket or at the farmer's market. Studies in America have shown that at the farmer's market, people have 10 times more conversations with one another. And these conversations are including the children who are able to play, who don't have giant sugar-coated candies just screaming out at them from the supermarket shelves, but instead they're often musicians, real people to play with, and space. And by the way, these farmers' markets are also now turning into covered markets so that they are there the whole year around. And more products are being preserved and maintained so that they can be sold throughout the year, redeveloping the infrastructure. Well, ultimately, what this movement represents is that rebuilding of connections. And these connections are about the love that are a universal human need. Every child grows up needing and wanting that sense of being seen, heard, and appreciated. And localization rebuilds those connections, and those connections and that love are a universal human need. And this is why we call localization the economics of happiness. Thank you.
Helena さん、ありがとうございました。
Thank you so much, Helena. It really was a wonderful lecture that pushes us to think for ourselves, each one of us. She'll be joining the talk session, which is part 2 of our forum today. So we look forward to seeing you again. The next program is a message from young people. As part of the educational program, in collaboration with the UNESCO, every year we have with NHK, Japan Broadcasting Corporation, Japan Private High School Education, they and Nikkei Inc., Tokyo Metropolitan Board of Education are supporting Pedissimo. It's a collaboration. The contest for 2012 has a theme, Creating the Future We Want. And a better future starts with writing your ideals. Children and young people have written wonderful essays, as you have heard from the President, to realize from 151 countries, we have 11,857 entries. And the first prize will be the Minister of Education Award, and there are two winners. Let me introduce it from the children's category. Elisei Birkov, Master Elisei Birkov from Belarus. He lives in Minsk City, and he's in Gymnasium 1. He's 13, likes to ride bicycles, read books, interested in foreign languages. He is studying English, Spanish, and Chinese. He would like to take the languages in the university. He came with his mother. From the youth category, Anjali Sharka from Bangladesh. She's 21. She's a student of management at the University of Dhaka. She is also involved in social welfare activities apart from being a student. She has a social project, and she is an entrepreneur. She loves to travel. She is curious, wanting to learn from people she meets. So we invite the two to share with us your essay. Mr. Elise, please start yours.
Good afternoon. Konnichiwa. Добрый день. It is a great privilege for me to present you my essay. Predictable future. I have never really thought about the future until 2 months ago an announcement was made at our school about one girl. She was seriously ill. She had cancer, a very aggressive form of it. The doctors in our country did everything they could for her. Still, she was dying. Her only hope was the treatment she could get in Germany. But she needed minimum of 50,000 euros to be able to go, and soon. The price of the human life. It's lots of money here. So her parents started raising funds wherever they could, and eventually came to our school. Nowadays, we have almost got used to such stories because after the Chernobyl nuclear power station accident, the rate of cancer among children in Belarus has increased 13 times. This power station is located almost on the border of our republic, and right after the accident, the wind was blowing north, carrying radioactive clouds in our direction. So there are articles in newspapers, announcements on TV, internet, about children dying of cancer who need urgent help. But this girl was special. I understood this when I saw her picture. She was bald after chemotherapy, very pale, hollow-eyed, and smiling. She has such a radiant smile. This impressed me greatly, and not only me. I saw that most of my classmates brought money for her the next day. How courageous must she be to smile in that situation? Then for a moment, I imagined myself in her place. How scary must it be to know that your life might end in a day, a month, but she seemed not to be afraid. Suddenly I got an insight. I will also die. All people die. The only difference was that she knew it could happen soon. Death became real for her, but for me it used to be unreal, like a phantom. I became aware of part of my future, which is common for all of us. That day, when I was doing my math homework, I imagined that our lives on the earth aren't half lines, they're intercepts, as they have the beginning and the end. Some of us have longer intercepts, others shorter. Anyway, time is too limited to spend it on trifles, to waste it. When surfing the net, I came across a book, Death, the Final Stage of Growth, by Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. It gives a lot of examples of what changes people undergo when they learn that they will die soon. They experience a great leap in their spiritual development and become much happier than they used to be when they were enjoying the boons of life, thinking that they would live forever. I believe it is true for me as well, not because I am going to die soon. On the contrary, I hope to live long. But this girl and her attitude made me appreciate and treasure what I have. Now I try to manage my days, putting important things first, developing good relations with people around me, spending time with them, showing care, listening to them. It's so hard. Nevertheless, I believe that if I manage to build my days around these priorities, I won't consider my life wasted when a predictable future comes. What a paradox! I decided to ruin my life when I started thinking about death. How wise the Romans were when they said, memento mori. This expression shows that we shouldn't take our life as a rough book, thinking that one day in a faraway future we'll be able to rewrite it. No, we only have a fair copy. What is done, and what is not done might never be done. Chance to behave correctly we have today, not in the future. Death is a great motivator of life, not the fear of death that terrorists try to impose on people and that way make them do what they want. No, I mean the recognition of it, which motivates us to be good now and here, thus leading us to a better future. Thank you for your attention.
どうもありがとうございました。13歳ですね。素晴らしい。
Thank you so much. You're only 13. What a wonderful essay that was.
それでは続きましてアンジェリさんに受賞作品を発表していただきます。
To give her work.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Anjali Sarkar from Bangladesh. This essay is a story of my life, how I discovered true happiness. When I was born, my complexion was quite dark, and that made my parents worried. In Bangladesh, everyone prefers girls having fair skin color. Relatives and neighbors used to tell that my parents would need to pay a large dowry in my marriage. I grew up hearing such comments. I felt sad, worried, and even ashamed. From a very young age, I was desperate for achievements so that I can make up for my not so beautiful look with my work. I studied hard. I tried singing, dancing, painting, and whatnot. I tried frantically to be the best so that no one can look down on me because I lack beauty. Eventually, all those hard work started to pay off. Successes rushed into my life, one after another. When I was 18, I got admitted into the most prestigious business school in my country, which made me even more desperate for achievements. However, things started to change gradually. Earlier, my world was small: school, home, family, and a few friends. In university, I met hundreds of people who were hankering after achievements, money, social status. I talked with many of my school alumni whose lives were full of pride, social status, and prestige. I observed their so-called successful lives. Surprisingly, successes could not make them happy. Deep inside, they were depressed. They cursed their bosses, felt dissatisfied with their work, and could not spend quality time with their families. I was confused. What do we really expect from life? What should we do today to build our future tomorrow? I observed carefully and sensed a lack of positivity in the air. Dissatisfaction, intolerance, and cynicism were growing whimsically. I felt something was wrong. Statistics says our country is progressing, but what is about our people? Are we happier than before, or are we happy at all? I talked with more people and tried to discover the exceptional things, events, and people around me who are different from the crowd. I looked for people who were living happily, working hard to fulfill their dreams, helping others, and contributing to the society. Gradually, I realized what kind of future I want. Nowadays, we are driven by material pleasure in life. Money, property, salary, luxury. These things matter most to us. We often forget the value of little things, small gifts that have made our lives truly blessed. Things like health, relationships, and family that we consider as given and never consciously think about are the most important things in our life. We need to think beyond numbers and objects, care about numerous intangible gifts that are surrounding us. Our values, thoughts, dreams, and beloved ones are taking our lives forward, not the food we eat or the money we spend. I was a typical business student, wanting to work in a large multinational company, earn a fat paycheck at the end of the month, and live a luxurious life. But when I realized what really mattered in life, I chose not to follow the crowd and designed my own destiny. I decided to be a social entrepreneur and established a startup that provides rural poor with safe sanitation. When I learned to acknowledge the small blessings in life, I understood that to achieve true success, we should cooperate, not compete. So I started motivating my classmates and juniors. I shared my thoughts with my teachers. At first, everyone considered my wish to work for the poor a short-term fantasy. They advised, forbade, and even ridiculed me. But I followed my heart. As I set my priorities right and gave importance to the small things that matter, nothing could discourage me. The idea of following one's heart is not new, but from my experience, I have learned that why so many people fail to do it. We often forget to value the most precious things and crave for the not so valued ones. Small things matter, but we often ignore those. Now I'm 21 years old. My heart is full of passion, my eyes sparkle with confidence. No more confusion, no more inferiority complexes, no worries for not being a beauty queen. I am ready to do something for my country and for the world through what I love, social business. Every social business aligns people, profit, and planet simultaneously. I love to work in my social business, but I love even more to help other entrepreneurs to start their own ones. This is how happiness is created in a community and spreads itself. I inspire young girls to come out of their cocoons and see the world, as I am doing now. I am a free bird, and now I am encouraging other birds to break their cages. Future is nowhere but in our own hands. Enough running after petty material things. Let's start counting the uncountable. Thank you.
Anjali-san, ありがとうございました。
Thank you so much, Ms. Anjali. Next, we would like to move on to the award ceremony. I'd like to call upon Mr. Takafumi Goda, who is the Director General of Lifelong Learning Policy Bureau of Ministry of Education, Culture, Sports, Science and Technology of Japan, to present the awards to these two young people. Mr. Goda, please. Please. Certificate of Commendation. The Ministry of Education, Culture, Sports, Science and Technology of Japan hereby confers first prize upon Elise Bielkuski of Belarus in recognition of your outstanding achievement in the children's category of the 2012 International Essay Contest for Young People, co-organized by the Goi Peace Foundation and the United Nations Education, Science, Cultural Organization. November 25, 2012. Makiko Tanaka, Ministry of Education, Culture, Sports, Science and Technology of Japan. Certificate of Commendation. The Ministry of Education, Culture, Sports, Science and Technology of Japan hereby confers first prize upon Anjali Salkar of Bangladesh in recognition of your outstanding achievement in youth category of the 2012 International Essay Contest for Young People, co-organized by the Goi Peace Foundation and UNESCO. November 25, 2012. Makiko Tanaka, Ministry of Education, Culture, Sports, Science and Technology of Japan.
Elise and
Anjali, congratulations to the two of you. We would like to have a few words from Mr. Goda. Mr. Goda, please. Thank you very much. This is Goda, Director General of Lifelong Learning Policy Bureau of MEXT. I would like to applaud the two young people who have been awarded the MEXT Award for this year. Congratulations to you. This is the contest for the youth, in which it is co-organized by the Goi Peace Foundation and UNESCO. As was said, more than 150 countries and 12,000 entries were participating in the contest before these two young people were awarded. They were talking about the importance of the life and compassion towards others, as well as exploring what the true happiness is. They have been thinking about that, and they have been acting so as to identify that. Life cannot be rewritten. Future is in our hands, as was said. I must say that I was much encouraged, and I was deeply moved at the same time. The value of happiness is something that needs to be thought by each and every individual, and each and every individual needs to act. I believe this to be extremely important. In the prince, the prince said that the true happiness cannot be seen. In this competition, for those who are seeking and wanting happiness, I do hope that it would prosper more, as the little prince in Le Petit Prince had said. For those of you who are here, I would like to hope for your happiness and prosperity as I close my words of congratulations. Once again, I'd like to congratulate the two young people. Thank you very much, Mr. Goda. There was, in the children's section, Mr. Ashir Yaramusk of Burkina Faso and Orgenrod Jerome of Uganda, and in the youth division, Stella Tu of US and Oscar Chen Kene of Colombia were awarded the second prize. And from the 5 people who have been awarded the third prize, Ms. Miyuki Nogi is here from the Sendai University in Miyagi Prefecture. Ms. Nogi, would you please stand up to be recognized? And there was an award that's been awarding the schools and organizations who have done well. And Ichikawa Junior and Senior High School in Chiba Prefecture was selected to be awarded the Best School Award. We have Principal Nobuhisa Ogawa, as well as Yoichi Shibuya, as well as Riku Kinoshita and Eriko Onuki, who are students, and Haruka Kawada and Maho Kanamaru, who were given the honorable mention. Would you please come up to the stage, please? Ichikawa Junior High School and Senior High School had received the most number of third prizes among the 134 organizations. Last month, they were designated as a UNESCO school to engage actively in promoting the activities of UNESCO. As for the Best School Award, it will be presented by Mr. Shunichi Tokura, who is the member of the contest panel judge and who is also a composer. Mr. Tokura. Award, Ichikawa Junior and Senior High School. In recognition of the outstanding achievement in the Best School category of the 2012 International Essay Contest for the Youth, co-organized by the Goi Peace Foundation and UNESCO, we would like to compliment you for your excellent educational activities towards peace and sustainable future. We hereby present to you the Best School Award. 25th of November 2012, Goi Peace Foundation, Masami Sayonji, who is chairperson, and Hiro Sayonji, the president. The members of the Ichikawa Junior and Senior High School, congratulations. Congratulations to you. I'd like to ask Mr. Tokura to say a few words. Congratulations to all of you for being awarded. This is the contest in which I have the honor of attending as a member of the contest panel judges. There were 12,000 entries. And for one who has been participating as a contest panel from the beginning, this is a big surprise and a big joy to us. This represents 151 countries, which means that it would include European nations, the United States and Japan, which are the advanced nations. But in addition, we had some entries from small farms where the children do live in Africa, or from the Middle East, where the bombs might explode in your backyard, or in the Latin America where there is conflict, a child who has lost both parents. There were so many heartwarming essays, but so much hope and so much enthusiasm that I read so many hundreds of them. It may be that man is born with a big asset, I believe, a big treasure. When I look at them, maybe the adults on the process of maturing might have forgotten or left this big present, a big gift, a big treasure behind, so that now it's so small at present. But in this big treasure, there is hope, there is courage, there is enthusiasm, and the biggest of all is love. And when you think about that, and when we read this, I remind myself that I am reminded of something that I have forgotten for some years, which has crossed my heart and crossed my mind. And I feel that I was given the courage from all these children so that the adults like us would have to do better. The Goi Peace Foundation has given the opportunity to award these children over the years. Starting from the first step of sustainability, and I do hope that you will continue to do so way into the future, so that something we have forgotten down the road, hope, love, and courage, would be something that will be seen everywhere and anywhere on this earth. Thank you very much. Mr. Shunichi Tokura, thank you very much. And to the members who have been awarded for the essay contest, I'd like to congratulate you once again.